Salford's Royal Hospital. I started by asking him why he was prepared to support British airstrikes against IS in Iraq, but not Syria.
What I've said is I'm open to the idea of British action in Iraq with clear criteria about the difference we can make, whether we can succeed, legitimacy and legality. And look, let's just take this in a sort of calm and measured way, because I think that is the lesson of the past.
Well, the lesson is yes and no, as far as I can tell. It surely ought either to be yes or no.
Well,
and this is a war against an entity which knows no borders.
I think I've laid out.
The Prime Minister has said we are under attack. I think
I've laid out a pretty clear position on this, John. A pretty clear approach, pretty clear set of criteria. I think it's really important to do everything you can to make action legitimate. I think there are additional differences between Iraq and Syria. Not least, we're not going to send ground troops into either place.
No, nobody suggested that.
No, but hang on a minute. The question then is, how do you make airstrikes effective? What are the troops going to be on the ground? It's more obvious what that is in Iraq than it is in Syria.
Well, beyond that security threat, what do you think is the greatest issue facing the next British government, whatever complexion it's made up of?
In terms of domestic policy, I think the biggest issue that we face is, can this country work for most working people once again, or are we consigned to a more and more unequal country that only works for a few rich people at the top? I think that is the biggest question. That is the election question. And what I laid out yesterday is a plan to say we can make this country work once again for working people, whether it's on the minimum wage or the health service or apprenticeships or housing.
Well, what about the deficit?
The deficit is an important issue.
Well, you forgot to mention it.
Well, I said that we were not...
That's the second time, 2 days running.
Well, I said that we were not going to fund our additional plans on the NHS through higher borrowing. I talk a lot about the deficit.
Nobody's talking about borrowing, everybody's talking about paying off this appalling deficit and debt.
Yeah, and what I laid out yesterday was a plan for the future...
Which excluded the deficit.
Which doesn't require higher borrowing.
No, he did not mention the deficit, which is surely the most important thing of all. He did not mention it. That is the essence of our economic crisis.
Well, I don't actually agree with... Well, I certainly don't agree with you that this is the essence of our economic crisis. The essence of our economic crisis was a global financial crash. The Tories definitely say...
In which the Labour government played a major role.
The Tories say, John, that the deficit caused the global financial crisis. It's the other way around. The global financial crisis caused our deficit. Now, we've got to get that down, but one of the questions...
how could you present a job application, which is what you described your speech as being, without setting out the backdrop against which you were going to have to take up the job?
Two things. One, I think it did set out the backdrop.
You didn't mention the deficit.
Because actually the way I was explaining the way we would meet our plans was not on the basis of higher borrowing. But look, secondly...
But you've been candid. You forgot. How could you forget something so cardinal to the building of your piece?
All I say is that I prepare speeches in advance and then I go and deliver them without notes. Now, sometimes you miss bits out, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you add sections of the speech. I've been pretty clear about our case on the deficit. Ed Balls couldn't have been...
notes, this is a stunt.
I don't actually see it that way. I actually think
how do you see leaving out the deficit? You just tell us how you see that.
The way I see it is, I think that what I've been able to do in the last 3 conference speeches is speak to people directly about what I care about. And that's what yesterday was about. And I laid out a plan for our future, a very clear plan for our future. And you asked me what the biggest issue was, and I described it to you. Now, I think the deficit is important. I don't think, unlike this government, it's the only issue. They think it's the only issue that we face. I think we face issues about whether people can afford to live. We face issues about whether people can have hope for their children to do better than them, about our NHS.
But
they are absolutely election issues.
In the paragraph you left out, you actually accounted, you actually said 79 billion...
75 billion.
75 billion to service the deficit, right?
The debt, actually.
Yeah, well, the debt. 75 billion to service the debt. And that is more than the sum total spent on education. You said it, but you didn't say it in your speech. I mean, that is massive.
Well, I know.
How can you be caring about the NHS and everything else if you're not prepared to be candid with the population about what actually confronts them next time they have...
Well, I've actually been very candid with people, and we've been very candid with people. We've been candid about some of the changes we have to make, including on child benefit. We've been candid about higher taxes on some of the wealthiest, like the 50p tax rate. We've been very candid with people, John.
You mentioned a lot of normal people that you met. Josephine, Gareth, Colin. Is this to try to normalise yourself? Do you see yourself as in some way not normal? Why do you need to come to these people to make your case?
No, it's to change get out of the Westminster bubble. It's to get out of the Westminster bubble.
Not very far. Somewhere on Hampstead Heath.
Because the truth is that politics is conducted as a spectator sport apart from everyday people. And the reason why I did that is to paint a picture of the country that I see.
But when you did get out of Westminster and went to Scotland, you were a fish out of water. I mean, all three of you leaders looked exactly the same, completely out of touch.
I don't accept that at all. I don't accept.
I was there. I had to witness it.
Well, you weren't with me. At least not what I saw.
I was with the Scots who were observing.
Right. Well, that's not what I saw. Actually, what I see is that we had 45% of people who wanted to split apart from our country because they feel this country doesn't work for them, and we've got to show them that we can change things.
They saw you as a remote breed who hang around somewhere down.
You weren't even with me, John. So come on,
I talked to people about how they saw you.
Look, I think there is definitely a challenge of Westminster politics. Definitely a challenge to show you can change people's lives, but it's a challenge I relish.
Ed Miliband, thank you for talking to us.